This is Look West, a podcast from California's Assembly Democrats.
Hi, I'm Connor Turcott with Look West. Students have returned to schools all across California, and LGBTQ plus students are among those facing intentional and sometimes unintentional insults and attacks. Look West producer Mahalia LeClerc sat down with a couple of students and Assemblymember Rick Chavez Zbur, who has written legislation on this topic. Hi, Mahalia.
Hi, Connor. The legislation Assemblymember Zbur wrote would provide additional training for staff and teachers so they can foster an inclusive environment for LGBTQ plus students. The end result being a safer and more supportive school for all students.
In your conversation with the Assemblymember and the students, what stood out to you?
Something that stood out to me was Adrian's experience of passing as cisgender and the things people would say in front of him because of that. And then Zbur mentioning that he had very similar experiences as people assumed he was straight before he came out. This shared experience between Adrian as a young transgender man and Zbur as an older generation gay man, I think it just stood out to me because I've also experienced that as a queer woman kind of between their ages. I think many people who don't think they know any LGBTQ plus people are just unaware of us because of their own bias that assumes everyone is cisgender or heterosexual by default. Perhaps teachers and schools make that assumption too much as well.
On a recent late afternoon after school had let out for the day, you caught up with Assemblymember Zbur and Adrian and Gracie, the two high school students. After they dropped their backpacks, they hopped on a Zoom call that students today are all too familiar with to talk to you and the Assemblymember.
Adrian and Gracie, from your perspective, why is a bill like AB 5 protecting LGBTQ plus students important?
It's good because most people I've encountered, they're not hateful people. They just don't have the information that they need to be able to provide that environment that kids need.
I completely agree with that. I think that it's less of an issue of people actively trying to be hateful, and it's more of an issue of people who just don't understand the gravity of some of the things they're doing. And I think that educating people is so important to just keeping everybody safe and making sure everybody feels welcomed, especially in a learning environment.
Have you had
Yes.
times when you haven't felt welcomed or when a teacher or staff member didn't respond in the best way?
I've had pretty good responses, but I had a history teacher one time who we were doing a lesson on the patriarchy, and he decided that he was going to call on every single girl in the class, and there were multiple people who said, "We're not girls, don't call on us," and he still called on us. And then afterwards, I was the front runner. I went up on behalf of all of us and was like, "Hey, that's not cool," and he responded well to that. So that teacher was fine with me, but I feel like it really wasn't the best response because he shouldn't really just be respecting me, he should be everyone.
Yeah, I really agree. I've never experienced a teacher who felt like they were like out to get me or anything, but I have had experiences where maybe there were students who were being ignorant, or they were just saying things that were really hurtful, whether or not they meant it, and teachers just, they don't really know what to do in that situation, I find. And a lot of things with gender too, I think they just find it kind of hard to understand because they haven't been educated on it enough. So if a student comes out as transgender, the teachers, they never really know how to approach them, and it just becomes a very uncomfortable environment for everybody.
Do you find that you have to educate your teachers at times?
I do, yeah. I feel like sometimes, not just me, but just all of my fellow students too, I feel like they're kind of, the teachers, they just don't know what to do. And sometimes, we'll have to explain something to them. So A couple years ago, I had a friend who is non-binary, and it took them a really long time to explain to my teacher how to address them and how they wanted to be addressed.
Rick, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Adrian and Gracie are saying are sort of some of the things that my kids experience, which was one of the reasons why I became so interested in bringing this bill. I want to point out that, the teachers unions have been really supportive of this bill. And this isn't a bill that's critical of teachers. I mean, teachers really, put their careers to really help educate our kids, and teachers are really committed to, giving people opportunities. But most of the times what my kids found out, and what I've experienced, is the fact that teachers really did not know how to address certain kinds of situations. And so what the bill is doing is it's basically giving the teachers the training and the tools that they need to respond to all the kinds of things that are necessary to give kids a safe learning environment. So, for example, my daughter, when she was in 5th grade, there was a little girl in her class who had parents who did not like LGBTQ plus people, and found out that she had LGBTQ plus parents, and told the little girl that she couldn't play with my daughter anymore. And then a few weeks later, she decided they were having a birthday party for this little girl. And the little girl distributed invitations to every kid in the class, but excluded my daughter because she had gay and lesbian parents. And my daughter came home. She's only in 5th grade. She was really upset, and we went and talked to the teacher, and the teacher wasn't a bad teacher. She was a really great teacher. And she said, look, we just aren't given any training to know what to do. The little girl brought these invitations, started circulating them in the entire class, and we don't have any standards. We don't have any procedures. We're not given any training. The appropriate thing to do is to have a policy that if you're actually distributing invitations through the schools, you can't be selective. You've got to invite either all of the kids or you don't do it, right? That's what should happen. But that teacher didn't know that, and the school district didn't know it. Another case where it happened to my daughter when she was in middle school. She walked into her social studies class and opened up her classroom book that they were on the page the day before in the social studies class. And basically, on the page that they had ended the day before, it scrawled in Sharpie was hate speech, kill all the effing people. And my daughter pointed it out to the teacher, and he just didn't think that it was a big deal because he hadn't been trained about what to do in that circumstance. And so, in both cases, there were good teachers. The teachers weren't homophobic. They just didn't have the training. And so, one of the things I'm really thankful for is that we've got both CFT and California Teachers Association, who are the major teachers unions and the educators unions in the state, are both strong sponsors of this bill and are asking for it.
That makes sense. The teachers are looking for these resources to support their students. Adrian or Gracie, do either of you want to talk about some of the ways it's affected you or your friends?
In my experience, as someone who most people don't look at me and assume I'm trans, I am able to go through my high school and my daily life with most people not looking at me. So just being able to walk through my life and have people who I know, like, just because of the media, and most people probably have opinions about trans people, and a lot of people probably have very bigoted opinions, or they're just very closed-minded. And a lot of people are under the impression that they can just detect every trans person, or that trans people have a look. And I'm kind of able to fly under that radar, and I end up being in these bubbles, and I hear a lot of things, and just being able to almost feel like an undercover trans person, like hearing the other side because they don't know. And it's just a really interesting experience because you're just hearing these things and you feel like the thing, like you're the big bad thing that the media is talking about. And they're talking about how horrible trans people are, or how unnatural trans people are. And then they'll turn around and shake your hand and say, nice to meet you, or nice to see you again. So it's just very strange. And also, I've had experiences where teachers do try to incorporate LGBTQ topics in class. And I just kind of sulk in my chair a little bit because, like, they're talking about me, but no one knows they're talking about me. Like, no one's looking at me because people have this idea that, like, that trans people are so obscure in our society, but really we're the same. And in my experience, it's just been really eye opening to see that even the people who think they can spot out a trans person really can't. Because at the end of the day, there really is almost no difference.
Thank you, Gracie.
Um, when I was in 8th grade, at the very end of the year, my school's GSA club did an event where they were selling pride grams, and a bunch of the boys in my class, they bought them for each other as a joke, and they were laughing at each other when they got the grams. And even just something that small, where maybe they're just doing it as a joke, that can be really hurtful if you are kind of what they're laughing at, and it could have long-term effects, I feel like, and it can make you kind of question your worth. And especially in that situation, talking about how teachers don't have the training to handle it, when that happened, my teacher, she didn't really know what to do. And you could tell that she really wasn't okay with it, but she didn't know exactly how she was supposed to react or stop them or anything. And there have just been a lot of situations like this where just seemingly small things happen, or things happen that maybe a cisgender heterosexual person wouldn't really bat an eye at, that they would think was okay. But when it's aimed at you, even if it's indirect, something that small can have a really profound effect, and it can be really, really upsetting. And I don't think that people in school should have to be worrying about that. You know, they have assignments, they have grades, they have all of this other stuff to be worrying about. And just to add something like that on top of it is really upsetting. And I think that the only way that we can really kind of work towards stopping it is just to, start with educating the teachers and maybe having better education for kids too, so that they understand more of the gravity of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, that perhaps educating our teachers more can also help educate the students.
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of hear Gracie say that, because I talk to my own kids a lot. Now I have got 2 twins now that are 14 years old. They just finished middle school. They're going into high school. And I ask them a lot. So first of all, their school district, which is the South Pasadena School District, which is considered a very good school district in Southern California in a relatively, progressive area. The school district is horrible on these issues. I mean, they think that because they're in in an area that is not hostile to LGBTQ people, that they don't have to do anything to make the school environment safe and supportive for these kids. We know that if a teacher is trained to intervene in these circumstances, they will intervene. But if they've never trained to do that, and there's not a policy that requires them to do that, and a school district thinks they don't have to do anything, then nothing happens. And it's interesting to hear Gracie and Adrian's comments, because they really comport. If you talk to kids that are in these schools, and it's not just in school districts that are in remote areas, it's in school districts that are in, some of the urban and suburban areas of the state also have these problems. You'll see that school districts are just not doing enough to really provide supportive learning environments for these kids. These kids shouldn't have to be on a playground where there are jokes being made about them and a teacher being there and no one intervening. I mean, they should be taught about what the best practices are to create a safe learning environment, and that's what this bill does.
What are the best practices?
Well, one of the nice things about this bill is it basically will require that school districts put in place training programs for teachers and staff in grades 7 through 12 that have been identified by experts as the best practices for creating safe learning environments. The Department of Public Instruction has been working on a curriculum that is 6 1-hour, they're 1-hour segments that are in 20-minute pieces. And so the bill requires 1 hour of training for a teacher each year. So over 6 years, they would get the full complement of training in a bunch of different segments. But it's basically everything from when you should intervene to things like what are appropriate pronouns, what do you do if a student comes to you and basically is having certain kinds of problems, where are the resources in your communities? What do you do if a child comes into the room and starts passing out invitations to something you don't know about? You would actually go to the child and say, is every student being invited? You would actually have procedures in place so that the teachers understand what should happen in the classroom.
Adrian and Gracie, are there any things that you wish that your teachers knew or understood better, or that you advice that you would give to them?
For me, I would say don't be afraid to ask, because I've had a lot of teachers be terrified to ask because they're terrified of offending me or making mistakes. Or I've had teachers ask me about other kids because they're scared of asking questions. And I think what's a good idea is to just at the beginning of the year, just name cards, pronouns, that kind of stuff, just really simple introductions. I've had teachers because I've just started school. So this past week they've been all about me slides, and it will be cisgender teachers. They'll have their pronouns on their slides. And I think that's just a really great idea. And some students put their pronouns, some don't, but it's just a really good way to integrate that practice into the classroom and not be afraid to ask kids, hey, what are your pronouns? Or have kids say, these are my pronouns. I think that really helps.
Gracie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with the not being afraid to ask thing. I've had so many teachers who, whenever the subject of anything LGBTQ comes up, they don't really know how to act, and they're so scared of offending people that they just kind of try to subtly change the subject a little. And it's really sad when they do that, because I think it's so wonderful when a teacher wants to learn and they want to create a more open environment. And I just wish more teachers would be open to asking questions and trying to figure out how they can make everybody feel as safe and supported as possible.
I'm curious if you've ever had, or if you feel like you have a teacher that is safe to go to or has stood up for you at times, or another peer that has them, what that's meant for you.
Yeah, I think that I've had teachers who I definitely felt more safe with than other teachers, and it was the teachers who kind of had these practices, who would call somebody out if they were saying something really ignorant, or who would ask people for their pronouns. Just teachers who practice little things like this, I feel more safe around, just in all aspects, not even concerning gender and sexuality, but just to know that they're accepting in that way makes me feel really safe going to them about anything.
Adrian, what about you?
I've had, even with non-LGBTQ issues, I've had a certain teacher who was always looking out for me for just my health. There was a day I was really sick and I was like, no, I'm fine. She's like, no, you need to go home. And she sent me home, and it was just really nice for her to look out for me. She was my English teacher and my journalism advisor. And she also, on the first day of school, was really, because my name hadn't been changed in the system yet. So she was just really supportive right off the get-go. And she's one of my favorite teachers at school. She's just really, she is my safety net at school. She's really has been there for me.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I do feel like in the school system nowadays, and this extends to so much more than just this particular issue, but I feel like, especially with a lot of the training programs, they kind of train teachers to teach, but not as much to take care of their students. And so it leads to a lot of students who don't feel appreciated and who feel like their worth is all about their grades or how well they do on an assignment. And I feel like just training teachers to be able to help their students as a whole, not just to become academically better, training teachers to be able to just wholeheartedly help students, I think is really important. And I think that that will create a better school environment for everyone.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the holistic approach towards students. Do you think that having teachers that maybe don't know how to support LGBTQ plus students well affects their ability to learn in the classroom?
For me, yes, because I've had this experience where I had one teacher who would misgender me somehow, even though I had been out the entire time in his class. And everyone, like all my friends in the class, it would distract us. We'd all laugh about it, or we'd turn around, or we just look at each other, and we were not paying attention to the subject. So it is very distracting, and also like emotionally, it's a big hit. It's just like I don't know. It's just like it feels like you're working so hard towards being able to feel seen, and this person has never known you before your transition, and somehow they're still misgendering you, and a part of me is like, what am I doing wrong? And then my friends are like, you're not doing anything wrong. This is just an old man. Um, but just those experiences, they are very distracting.
Yeah, a student's emotional well-being is crucial to them doing well in school. And I feel like right now there are so many LGBTQ students, even in places that are considered to be very progressive, who just don't feel supported. And when you're worrying about your own safety and how other people view you, it makes it much harder to learn and to focus.
Can I say something too? One of the things that is really awesome is that both Adrian and Gracie have incredibly supportive parents and families. One of the things that this bill also is aimed at is the kids that don't. And you're hearing from, two students really how important it is that teachers be trained for what happens in school, right? In the learning environment. But one of the things that this bill is also focused on is helping teachers understand how to keep kids in the learning environment and in their homes and not homeless and leaving their homes because the situation at home is so bleak that they don't get the support they need there. The direct answer to your question, which is this training important because of, it impacts school success and your ability to learn? Well, it's really important if you actually don't have a home and have to leave school. So one of the reasons why this bill is important is for those kids that don't have these supportive families, so the teachers can do the best they can in the circumstances to help these kids, especially if they come to them and they find out that they're having these problems. So the kids come to these teachers, to the teachers that are the ones that are giving those indicia to kids that they sort of understand, that they're open, that they're actually accepting. The kinds of teachers that both Adrian and Gracie are talking about. Well, wouldn't it be great if every teacher was that way, right? For these kids, so they wouldn't have to sort of, find their way through the school. For the teachers that basically have had some, obviously the teachers that Adrian and Gracie are talking about, have had some training in this area. They sort of know what they're doing. And so part of this bill is to try to make it more broadly available to all teachers.
What are the long-term problems caused by bullying or these microaggressions towards LGBTQ plus students?
A lot of people think of this bill as being an anti-bullying bill. And it is that, but it's much more than that. If you look at sort of statistics in the LGBTQ community and you look at measures of health and well-being, LGBTQ kids and LGBTQ people generally are generally at the bottom of most measures of health and well-being. So, for example, 4 out of 10 homeless youth are members of the LGBTQ community. LGBTQ kids are, I think, about 4 times more likely to drop out of school than a non-LGBTQ kid. In the broader community, LGBTQ people are more likely to be living in poverty, more likely to have engagement with the criminal justice system, less likely to have health care, more likely to be unemployed. Really almost every measure of an LGBTQ person is at the bottom of the measures. And if you're a member who's also a member of a community of color, or you're an immigrant, or you're a person living with HIV, or you're even a woman, you tend to be at the end, and or LGBTQ, you're at the bottom of those measures. And so one of the things that we know is that statistics show that an LGBTQ kid, they may be facing bullying in school or in the community, or they may not have an accepting home environment. And especially in that latter case, when kids don't have an accepting home environment and are afraid to come out to their parents, the person they're most likely to turn to is a school teacher or someone in the schools. And if these teachers don't have the tools and the training to know how to help these kids, how to get them into counseling, how to help them navigate that issue with their parents or in their communities, they're more likely to drop out. So I've always viewed this as, you think about it, we know what's happening. Kids basically are facing challenges when they're in school. If they don't have the resources they need and they end up dropping out of school, they're most likely, or they leave their home, they're more likely to be living on the streets and turn to activities that result in engagement in the criminal justice system, and then having all of these statistics happen to them. And so the schools are one of the ways of intervening and really helping support these kids and helping give teachers and school staff the ability to identify kids that are at risk and kids that are facing challenges, and really help them stay in school and navigate the relationships they're having with their parents. And a lot of people that are criticizing this bill, they basically say incorrectly that this bill is anti-parent. It really is not. The bill is really trying to help kids navigate a difficult situation and help them navigate difficult circumstances with their parents, and have the teachers have the appropriate tools so that they're actually following science and medicine and best practices on how to deal with challenges as they're coming out in their school years.
Do you feel that there is still more to do in this area?
Yes. Obviously the bill is part of, I think, some of the things that we need to do. Obviously, it's providing this training so that teachers can really help these kids. It's also making sure that we've got more services available to these kids. I don't think we fund the kinds of programs that these kids need enough. And so one of the problems that's out there is that not every community has the resources. It'd be great, for example, if a student came to a teacher, and in every jurisdiction, there was some place that the teacher could really help navigate to get support if they're having problems at home. I would like us to be doing more actually surveys of kids in schools so that we understand what we're doing. Equality California does do a survey which goes to the school district, but many school districts are answering it based on the information that they have. We don't do surveys of kids so we have good data understanding what's really going on in schools and what people like Adrian and Gracie are experiencing on the ground.
Do you feel that California is a leader in this area?
Yeah, it is a leader, obviously. Generally, we tend to, luckily we've got, California is a place where I do believe that we've got a strong lobby for social justice and LGBTQ civil rights and social justice, and we do push the envelope here, and I think it's really important. We are the beacon of hope, I think, for the rest of the country.
Our thanks to Assemblymember Zbur, Adrian, and Gracie for talking with us. From Mahalia LeClerc, I'm Connor Turcotte. Thank you for listening to Look West.
The Look West podcast is produced by California Assembly Democrats. When you think of Californian politics, remember to look west.